Hey folks, welcome back to Aircraft Adventures. If you've ever dreamed of landing on a lake, folding up your wings, and trailing your aircraft back home, all without breaking the bank, this one's for you. Today we're diving into 6 vintage amphibians you had to build yourself, and one of them requires the use of a basketball. Let's go! We're going to start off with a unique little airplane that not a lot of people know about, but those who do absolutely love it. We're talking about Volmer VJ-22 Sportsman. And just as interesting as the plane is the man behind the plane, Volmer Jensen. He was an aircraft designer who was a pioneer in sailplanes and ultralights. He actually built his first weight shift glider when he was 16. In the 1970s, Jensen developed one of the earliest ultralights, called the Sun Fun. Did you know that Jensen also designed spaceships? Sort of, at least. He was actually part of the team that designed the Star Trek I mock-up. Outside of aviation, Jensen loved diving and fishing. He dreamed of an airplane that could take him directly to the best diving spots. So, he designed one himself. That aircraft became the Volmer VJ-22. He named it the Chubasco, and it was strictly for his own use, his very own recreational amphibian. But it got everyone's attention where it landed, and people really liked what they saw, so Jensen decided to set up production. Unfortunately, the full-scale manufacturing didn't pan out, so instead, he decided to sell plans. And that's when the aircraft was renamed the Sportsman. So, what was the Sportsman like? It's a 2-seat amphibious aircraft designed to be simple and strong. The fuselage is made from mahogany plywood and then covered with a fiberglass cloth, which gives it solid waterproofing and good durability. The hull is built to handle both freshwater and saltwater operations. The engine is mounted high on a pylon, usually producing somewhere between 85 and 100 horsepower. Most owners go with a pusher configuration, but there are a few that chose a tractor setup instead. Just be careful not to lose your hat, or your head. In terms of performance, it's modest but practical. The cruise speed is around 85 miles per hour, with a range of about 300 miles. It will carry 2 people and a small amount of gear, just enough for a weekend trip or a few hours of exploring. It's estimated that around 100 Sportsmans were built over the years, and while you don't see them often, there's still an active community of owners and builders who keep its legacy alive. The aircraft has sort of a timeless appeal. Nothing flashy, just smart, practical design that works well for what it's meant to do. So, what do you think of the Sportsman? Have you ever seen one up close? Let me know in the comments. So we started this video series with the Volmer Sportsman, a straightforward, simple amphibian with a real grassroots feel. Now we're stepping things up quite a bit with a more complex design, the Taylor Coot. Compared to the Sportsman, the Coot is definitely a more advanced build. It requires more hours in the workshop, more metalworking skills, and just overall bigger project to take on. But with that complexity comes some really interesting design features. The Coot was designed by Moulton Taylor, the same guy who created the Aero car. This one first flew back in 1969, and like the Sportsman, it also sold in plans form only. Fun fact, the very first prototype of the Coot had a twin boom tail, kind of like a Cessna Skymaster, which is pretty unusual for an amphibian, but only one was ever built like that. So aside from the funny name, what was so special about the Coot? Well, let's take a look at the wings. While most amphibians use sponsons on the wings to keep them out of the water, the Coot's wing root doubles as a huge sponson and uses lots of dihedral to keep the wings out of the water. Because of this, they were named float wings. And the wings fold, which makes storage a lot easier if you're keeping it in a garage or towing it on a trailer. It's a unique look and probably works well. As far as power, everything between 100 horsepower to 200 horsepower has been used on the Coot. No matter how much horsepower you're packing, you're not getting anywhere fast, and cruise speed is somewhere around 110 miles an hour. Range is around 500 miles, suitable for a nice day trip to your favorite lake. Takeoff distance is usually around 800 to 1,000 feet, whether you're on land or water, and stall speed is around 50 miles per hour. So it's fairly forgiving in the air, but you'll need to be comfortable with a little more complexity if you're building or flying one. It's estimated that around 70 to 100 Coots have been built, which qualifies it as a rare bird. So yeah, the Taylor Coot isn't a beginner's project, but it offers a lot of playing in return. And if you're into amphibians and want something unique, it might be the right plane for you. Have you ever seen a Coot in person? Or maybe flown one? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience. And now on our list is our third home-built amphibian, the Glass Goose. Unlike the previous 2 amphibians, The Glass Goose was first designed in the 1980s and looks far more modern as well. And this goose is one odd duck. It looks a bit like an early Icon A5 with closely spaced wings. It was also sold in plans and was primarily constructed from fiberglass. There's not much else that looks quite like the Glass Goose. A biplane with its wings spaced out tightly from each other and no support struts. The landing gear has double wheels. This added extra safety in the event of a flat tire, and it also helps it move over uneven terrain and sand. The first version of the Glass Goose was named the Aerogear Seahawk. It was well intentioned in its design, but with only 125 horsepower, it was also highly underpowered. It's been said that under certain conditions, it would not take off at all. One Seahawk builder was not happy with the design, and in the span of 5 years added his own improvements. The wing was enlarged, sponsons added for more stability, increased power, and this was eventually renamed the Glass Goose. Originally a plans-built model, by the early 90s, the Glass Goose was also sold as a kit. It was now powered with 160 horsepower Lycoming. As far as performance, it had a respectable cruise speed of 140 miles per hour, and incredibly, a maximum range of 1,200 miles. That's about an 8-hour flight. Would you want to be stuck in this goose for that long? At least the cockpit was very spacious, as it should be if you chose to fly that far. The Glass Goose, for all its good traits, didn't quite fill every hangar around the world. Even in kit form, it's a long build with many complex surfaces. Not sure how many were built. If you have any more information on this goose, drop it in the comments below. The Avid Catalina is a quirky kit plane that seems to harken back to the golden age of aviation, with lots of struts and draggy hulls. It's arguably ugly, but oozes character, and for the few that own them, provides lots of fun. The Avid Catalina and Amphibian are direct descendants from the Avid Flyer, a wildly successful kit plane from the 1980s, and just one more of Dean Wilson's incredible designs. And there are many unique things about the Catalina. Flotation was provided by huge sponsons that wrap around the fuselage. These also house large tires, allowing the plane to go easily off-roading if needed. Wing flotation was provided by either traditional wing floats mounted inboards of wingtips, or floats built into the wingtips themselves. The cabin could fit up to 3 adults. The wings could be folded for easy stowage or trailering. Visibility was a priority with a huge wraparound windshield. Most were powered by Rotax 2-stroke engines, though a few were upgraded to 4-stroke Rotax 912s. Regardless of your engine preference, the Catalina never went anywhere fast, cruising at a leisurely 75 miles per hour and a climb rate of about 500 feet per minute. If you own a Catalina, low and slow is the way to go. As quirky as its looks were, so was its operation. The Catalina sat very low in the water. The cockpit was practically on the waterline, and any bit of chop could kick water back into the cabin. And so many owners installed bilge pumps, running at full tilt right through takeoff. In fact, a common checklist item was to check for any water sloshing around the floor before takeoff. The long wings and floats made for interesting crosswind landings too. Plus, it's easy to rip off a float with too much bank. Oh yeah, and what's up with the basketball nose? Well, if I were to guess, I'd say the basketball is a nice and cheap bumper for docking. But I also think it's a real conversation starter when a Catalina pulls up to the dock. About 100 kits were sold. Not sure how many are currently airworthy, but I presume not too many. George Pereira is a well-known name in experimental aviation. Among his designs were the sexy GP4 all-wood Speedster and the short-lived GP5 Reno Racer. But long before the GP4 and GP5, there was the Osprey I and II, which were home-built amphibians with a peculiar shape. George's first design was the Osprey, a minimalistic seaplane with no landing gear. The Osprey could fit one pilot in an open cockpit. Pereira's goal with the Osprey was to provide a seaplane experience at low build and operating cost, while allowing owners to fold the wings and trailer the Osprey home. The Osprey actually caught the Navy's attention, who then evaluated the tiny seaplane and renamed it the X-28 Air Skimmer, where it was to be put to use in Vietnam as a tiny river patrol seaplane. With the end of the war, the project fell through, but the lessons learned with the tiny Osprey were applied to an enlarged version, the Osprey II. The Osprey II addressed many of the shortcomings of the original Osprey. It had a highly streamlined enclosed canopy, retractable landing gear, and best of all, now you could bring your buddy along. So long as you didn't mind rubbing shoulders with your passenger. it was a tight fit. The Osprey II was typically powered with a Lycoming 0320 with 160 horsepower, and is characterized by its highly swept surfaces. That long tail would feel at home on a fighter jet. In the Pereira tradition, the Osprey II is made primarily out of wood, with foam and fiberglass providing the bottom hull shape. Like the previous models I mentioned, this one was only sold in plans. But Pereira designed the plans so owners could build the aircraft in a confined space, such as a one-car garage. Most builders managed to build theirs in about 4,000 hours. Performance is on par with most planes in this category, cruising at around 110 miles an hour. Climb rate was around 1,000 feet per minute. Roughly 1,000 sets of plans were sold and a couple hundred completed. And the prototype X-28 air skimmer can be found at the Kalamazoo Aviation History Museum. Last but not least, number 6 on our list of home-built amphibians, the Anderson Kingfisher. The Anderson Kingfisher is a pleasant-looking amphibian from the late 1960s. The Kingfisher strikes me as a Piper Cub that was somehow transformed into amphibian. Would you agree? The Kingfisher was developed by a Pan Am 747 captain named Earl William Anderson. Can you imagine what Captain Anderson was daydreaming about while cruising at 40,000 feet? If the Kingfisher seems to share similar lines to the Volmer Sportsman, it's not a coincidence. It was admittedly a direct inspiration. And they do share a lot of features. Snug seating for two, similar landing gear setup, similar building method, and a small flat-four engine. While most Sportsmen feature an engine mounted on top of the wing with a pusher propeller, the Kingfisher's is in front of the wing, right in view of the pilot and passenger, with the prop arc spinning right above their legs. A nice amenity available to Kingfisher builders was the option of using Piper Cub wings to help speed up build time. Another point for the Kingfisher. And the Kingfisher has a noticeably longer nose. Perhaps this made it a bit more stable in the water? Like most of the other models, this was also sold in plans only, and I have no idea how many were completed. Regardless, I think we can agree that the Kingfisher is easy on the eyes. And there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to share your thoughts about the aircraft featured today. And by the way, if there's an aircraft that you want me to cover in an upcoming video, just drop it in the comments below. There's a ton of material to go over for new videos. See you next time.